Hey, this is Andrew Darling, and you're listening to Return Lenten Reflections from All Saints Catholic Church in Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us.
This is the return. Running back to
Welcome back again, everybody. Welcome back to Return, where we're taking time each day to prepare our hearts for Easter and our souls for heaven. Today is the 20th day of Lent. We're making great progress, and it is Monday of the third week in Lent. So let's go ahead and dive into our reflections. But before we do that, be sure to go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done that already. We're like halfway through Lent. I don't know how you haven't, but if you haven't, go ahead and subscribe either on YouTube or the podcast platform that you're using to this podcast so that you can make sure that you don't miss any of our future episodes. Now, let's go ahead and dive into our podcast reflections for today. So every day we've been talking about a different word or a different theme, a different kind of idea to focus on for that day, something kind of simple to latch onto. Today, the word I want to focus on is listen. Listen. It's present in all of the readings for today. It's talking about Naaman the Syrian in the Old Testament, where he found out he was a leper, and he was a king, but he found out he was a leper, and he was had no way to cure it, and he found out that Elisha the prophet was maybe somebody that could help in Israel, and so he went and he told him to go wash himself in the Jordan, and he says, well, "That's it?" He's like, "Yeah, that's it." And he's sort of disappointed. He's like, "I thought something cooler would have to happen," but he almost walks away out of frustration. He thinks that, if it were that easy, why did I come all this way? He says, "No, really, do it. I promise you. This is what God is telling me to tell you." And he does it, and he's clean. And he says, I know that now that there is no God but the God of Israel. And then in the gospel, we have Jesus going back to Nazareth and preaching in the temple, and people getting really, really mad about it. And he mentions no prophet is ever accepted in their hometown. And he mentions the story of Elijah. He says there were plenty of people in Israel that could have heard the word of God, but it was only the one that was in Syria that wasn't even God's chosen people. He was the only one that actually heard. And again, there's a lot to be taken from all of this. There's so much depth to all of these, but I feel like we want to focus on the word listen today, is just because it's so important. It's such an important step to be able to have any kind of prayer life, have any kind of relationship with God, and especially during this time of Lent. If we want to have a relationship with God, but we never take the time to listen to Him, it's not going to be a very good relationship. Imagine if you did that with your spouse, or with your children, or with your parents, or whoever it is. If you always talked but never listened, your relationship might be there, but it's not going to be very strong. It's not going to be a lasting relationship. Being able to listen to the voice of God can be a really frustrating thing for us as human beings, because we don't usually hear a real voice. With our spouse or our parents or our children or our friends or whatever, we can hear a voice. We can at least see an email. We can hear a phone call. All of those things. But with God, we don't get that. We think, well, what am I listening for? Why am I spending the time listening if God's not going to say anything? But I encourage you to take this time during Lent to listen, because God is speaking. It's something that takes time to get used to. If you're waiting for the clouds to open up and the angels to come down and all of these things, maybe that'll happen. But more likely, in fact, definitely, I can assure you, God is going to speak to you in some way. It's going to be something quiet, something you have to be listening for. If you're in a loud restaurant and you're trying to listen to somebody across the room, it's difficult. It's just as hard to listen to somebody who's right across the table from you at that same restaurant. So during Lent, take the time to go out into the desert, step out of that loud, crowded restaurant. Just be there with you and the person that you're trying to listen to. Tune out all the other voices as best you can, so that it can be just you and God, and you can hear Him, and you can learn what His voice sounds like, how He talks, how His communication works. You can learn to listen so that going forward, you are able to hear Him better. So I encourage you today to do what you can to take this time to learn to listen to God, and to remember whatever it is He's trying to tell you, because He wouldn't do it if it weren't important. So thank you so much for listening to Return today. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for day 21. God bless.